Imagine you are holding an onion in your hand. It is small, knobby, and covered in grit. Now, imagine that this onion is worth a magnificent mansion by a canal, plus 2 horse-drawn carriages, and enough money to feed a family for 50 years. That is not a fairy tale. That is history. Welcome to the story of madness, greed, and ephemeral beauty. 100 bizarre details about the Great Tulip Mania of 1637.
Welcome to Weird History of Sleep.
Welcome to Weird History of Sleep. I am so glad you have chosen to set aside the worries of the modern world to be here tonight. Right now, find your most comfortable position on your soft bed. Pull the blanket up to your shoulders. Feel the safety and warmth wrapping around you. Take a deep breath, hold it for a moment, and exhale very slowly. Let the gentle darkness of the night soothe your tired eyes. Tonight, we will travel back in time. We will drift to 17th century Netherlands, a place of green canals, slowly turning windmills, and endless fields of flowers. We will count together, not sheep, but 100 small, strange, and true facts about tulip mania. Do not try to memorize them. Let my voice pass through your mind like a passing breeze. Your only task right now is to relax and fall asleep. Close your eyes and let us begin. Number 1. In the cold and wet winter of 1637, the value of a single tulip bulb surpassed all human imagination. To own a small, gritty Semper Augustus bulb, one had to pay a price equivalent to a magnificent mansion situated right on a romantic Amsterdam canal. Picture a red brick house with large glass windows reflecting the water, and all that grandeur exchanged for a single, fragile sprout. Number 2. Economic historians later called this strange period tulipomania. It is recorded as the first economic bubble in human history, a place where emotion completely overrode reason. Not gold, not silver, not spices from the east, but a scentless flower that blooms early and fades quickly became the focus of every desire, pushing an entire nation into an unprecedented collective intoxication. Number 3. The speed of the price increase was dizzying, like a dream from which you cannot wake. At the peak of the fever in January 1637, the value of tulips increased 20-fold in less than 30 days. Imagine your assets multiplying with every breath, every passing hour, making mud-stained farmers suddenly believe they held the key to eternal treasure. Number 4. A single bulb of the Semper Augustus variety, the most expensive flower with marble-like red and white streaks, was valued at up to 10,000 guilders. To help you visualize the magnitude of this number in the quiet of tonight, that amount was enough to feed, clothe, and pay for all living expenses for a middle-class Dutch family for 50 years. Half a century of comfort held within the palm of a hand. Number 5. The madness did not stop at cash. A historical record lists in detail the price paid for a single Viceroy bulb. The buyer had to exchange a massive list of goods, including 2 loads of wheat, 4 loads of rye, 4 fat oxen grazing in the field, 8 pigs, and 12 sheep with thick, warm wool. All that livestock quietly left their barns to be traded for 1 bulb. Number 6. But the barter list for that Viceroy bulb did not end with livestock. It also included essential provisions for winter feasts. 2 large barrels of aged wine, 4 barrels of foaming dark beer, 2 tons of rich yellow butter, and 1,000 pounds of premium Dutch cheese. Imagine the scent of butter and cheese, the richness of the wine. All the flavors of a prosperous life were wagered. Number 7. And finally, to complete the most bizarre commercial transaction in history, the buyer had to throw in a soft bed with curtains, a suit of velvet clothes, and a shining silver cup. From the bed where they rested every night to the cup they drank from every morning, all tangible and familiar assets were stripped away, exchanged only for the hope of a flower that would bloom in the spring. Number 8. Interestingly, these billion-dollar transactions did not take place on the solemn stock exchange of Amsterdam. No, they took place mostly in dim taverns, filled with pipe smoke and boisterous laughter. In the flickering candlelight and the haze of beer, men signed contracts worth fortunes, while outside, the snow continued to fall white and silent. Number 9. The Dutch people of that time gave this form of trade a poetic but sarcastic name, Windhandel. Translated into our language, it means trading in the wind, a name that suggests lightness, invisibility, and elusiveness. Money and promises flew back and forth like gusts of wind skimming over the canals, with no guarantees, no certainty, only fragile belief. Number 10. It was called trading in the wind because most people bought and sold bulbs they had never seen with their own eyes. In winter, those bulbs were still sleeping silently, buried deep under the brown, damp, and cold soil. Buyers bought only a belief that the flower existed, and that it would bloom in the exact color the seller promised, though no one could verify anything deep underground. Number 11. Economists argue that futures contracts, a complex financial instrument today, were actually born from this very fever. People bought the ownership rights to flowers at a time when they did not yet exist. They bought and sold the future, trading spring days that had not yet arrived, while the present was still a harsh winter. Time became a commodity that could be priced. Number 12. In the intoxication of the market, a 400% profit per year was considered normal and modest for speculators. This figure caused the greed of an entire nation to burn like fire, meeting a strong wind. Farmers accustomed to earning pennies from selling milk and eggs suddenly saw an opportunity to touch heavy bags of gold after just one night's sleep. Number 13. The fever spread so wide that the poorest in society could not stand on the sidelines. From lime-stained bricklayers and carpenters with calloused hands to maids and chimney sweeps, everyone sought ways to mortgage their precious tools. They traded their only means of livelihood to join the flower market, dreaming of a brilliant life change. Number 14. The Dutch financial system in the 17th century was considered the most advanced in the world, with a central bank and the first stock exchange. However, all that wisdom and order was completely powerless against the deadly seductive beauty of this flower. An entire solid economy suddenly became as soft and fragile as the tulip petals themselves in the wind. Number 15. If placed on a scale, an average tulip bulb weighs less than an ounce, about 28 grams. Yet, its trading value on the market was dozens of times higher than that weight in solid gold. An organic object, capable of rotting, capable of disease, was valued higher than eternal metal. It is a paradox that makes us reflect on the true value of things. Number 16. At that time, People did not buy flowers to look at them, nor to plant them in their gardens. They bought flowers for the sole purpose of selling them to someone else for a higher price the next day. The natural beauty of the flower was completely forgotten. The flower became a number, a promissory note, a cold speculative tool separated entirely from the original meaning of nature. Number 17. Dutch law at the time was very strict. It did not recognize or protect gambling debts. But strangely, the authorities treated speculative tulip contracts as legal business activities. The line between investing and gambling was blurred. The entire society united in a game of chance cloaked in the robes of solemn commerce. Number 18. The circulation of money was insanely fast. There were bulbs that changed hands 10 times in a single day. From the baker to the butcher, then to a nobleman. Its price increased after every handoff, even though the bulb lay motionless underground, unaware of the chaos and greed unfolding above ground in its name. Number 19. By 1637, the estimated market capitalization of tulips on paper was larger than the value of the Dutch East India Company, VOC. Remember, the VOC was the most powerful and wealthy company in the world at that time, possessing thousands of ships and its own army. Yet the value of that commercial empire was less than that of fragile flowers. A truly absurd comparison. Number 20. The illusion of wealth arrived so quickly that people believed in a new era. The Dutch believed that poverty would be wiped out from their country forever. They dreamed of a future where everyone was a millionaire, everyone lived in silk. It was a beautiful, sparkling, and sweet dream, but as fragile as a soap bubble, ready to burst at any moment when touched by reality. Number 21. Many people mistakenly believe that the tulip is a native child of the Netherlands, but that is not the truth. This haughty flower is actually a traveler from afar. Its original homeland lies in the wild and windswept Tian Shan mountains of Central Asia. Imagine wild flowers stretching strongly between dry rock crevices under the deep blue sky of the steppes, before they were brought to the damp lowlands of Europe. Number 22. The name tulip that we call it today has a very interesting linguistic origin. It comes from the word dulband in ancient Persian, meaning turban. When these flowers have not yet bloomed, their shape looks exactly like the silk scarves skillfully wrapped around the heads of Eastern men, a name that evokes legendary silk roads and distant mysterious lands. Number 23. This is perhaps the greatest and most heartbreaking irony of natural history. The most expensive flowers, the ones most hunted, were actually sick flowers. The magnificent beauty that drove all of Europe mad was not a sign of vigorous vitality, but a silent cry for help from a life that was gradually fading. Humans honored sickness, mistaking it for a masterpiece. Number 24. The vibrant streaks of color running along the petals, looking like dancing flames or the improvised brushstrokes of a genius painter, were called breaking. From a solid background color, the petals suddenly burst into complex veins, white mixed with red, yellow mixed with purple. It was a chaos of color, breaking all the orderly rules of nature, creating a unique beauty that could not be copied. Number 25. This deadly beauty was actually caused by a virus, known to science today as the mosaic virus, transmitted by tiny aphids sucking the plant's sap. Picture tiny invisible creatures diligently painting abstract pictures on the petals. Disease inadvertently turned an ordinary flower into a priceless work of art in the eyes of the infatuated. Number 26. This virus brought beauty, but it also brought a death sentence. It weakened the bulb from the inside, making the plant stunted and much harder to reproduce than healthy plants. This inadvertently created an economic paradox. The most beautiful flowers were the hardest to propagate and the rarest. The closer to death, the more brilliant and expensive the flower became. Number 27. The Dutch in the 17th century knew nothing of viruses or bacteria. They naively believed that the magical streaks of color were a miracle from God granted to lucky gardeners. Or sometimes they thought it was the result of special care. They looked at the diseased flowers with reverent eyes, as if witnessing a divine miracle descending to earth. Number 28. Patience was a luxury in this fever. If you planted a tulip from a tiny seed, you would have to wait 7 to 12 long years to see it bloom for the first time. Imagine sowing a seed when your child is born, and the flower only blooms when that child is about to enter their teenage years. A wait too long for the hurried beat of human greed. Number 29. However, nature always has shortcuts. A daughter bulb growing from the mother bulb can bloom the very next spring and retain the exact colors of the mother. This was the path to wealth that everyone craved. Instead of waiting a decade, they only needed to wait for one winter to pass. Those daughter bulbs were likened to bars of pure gold born from Mother Earth. Number 30. There is a harsh truth about time. Tulips only bloom brilliantly for about a week, or at most 10 days in mid-spring. Beauty worth millions of dollars, which tore families apart, existed for only a few short days before fading and falling to the ground. The eternity of asset value was in complete opposition to the ephemeral, soon bloomed, soon faded nature of the flower's life. Number 31. In a desperate attempt to create new flower colors, botanists of that time tried bizarre methods that smacked of alchemy. They tinkered in secret gardens, mixing all sorts of solutions, whispering spells into the soil. They believed they could bend the laws of creation to make gold from fragile petals. Number 32. One popular method was soaking the bulbs in rich red wine before planting. They nursed the naive hope that the alcohol and the red color of the grapes would seep into the roots, causing the flower to bloom with a seductive crimson or velvety purple. Imagine the bulb sleeping in wine, cocooned in the earth, carrying the drunken dreams of humans. Number 33. Others sprinkled painting pigments, the kind used by artists, directly onto the soil around the roots. They hoped the roots would drink those artificial color particles and send them up to dye the petals. It was a clumsy attempt by humans to intervene in nature's palette, trying to turn the garden into a real art studio. Number 34. Even bolder, they performed surgeries on the slants. They cut 2 bulbs of different colors in half, then tied the 2 halves tightly together, hoping they would heal and create a grotesque hybrid with 2 distinct colors, a kind of Frankenstein of the plant world, demonstrating the desire to control and mold life according to human will. Number 35. Unlike the fragrant rose or the sweet jasmine, the tulip is a flower with almost no scent. It seduced humans entirely through vision, through a haughty, cold, and silent beauty. It stood there, brilliant under the sun, but emitting no fragrance, like a beautiful but icy queen, meant only to be admired from afar, never to touch the soul. Number 36. To serve the buying and selling before the flowers bloomed, people created tulip books, catalogs hundreds of pages thick. Inside were hand-painted watercolor illustrations describing every vein, every spot of color on the petals. These books were passed from hand to hand in the candlelight of taverns, the only tangible thing people had to cling to when trading virtual fortunes. Number 37. In the class-stratified world of this flower, the cheapest ones were the solid colors, just pure yellow or white. They were disdainfully called Vode by the elite traders, meaning trash or rags. The simple original beauty of nature was suddenly despised, simply because they did not carry the expensive, breaking disease. Number 38. When not in bloom, a tulip bulb looks exactly like an ordinary onion. Both have a dry brown papery skin on the outside, and many white layers stacked inside. This fatal resemblance in appearance between a cheap spice and a priceless asset caused many tragicomic tragedies that we will mention later. A brown skin hiding both heaven and hell. Number 39. Unlike gold, diamonds, or land that can exist eternally through generations, a tulip bulb is an extremely fragile living organism. It can die at any moment due to winter frost, waterlogging, and rot, or simply be eaten by a hungry field mouse. The fate of an entire fortune sometimes depended solely on the teeth of a tiny rodent. Number 40. This is the cruelest zero-sum game. If the bulb lying in the cold ground stopped breathing before spring arrived, a merchant's $1,000,000 fortune would vanish without a trace. No insurance, no compensation. The huge sum of money spent would turn into smoke, leaving behind only a handful of worthless black soil. Riches and ruin were separated only by a thin layer of earth. Number 41. There is a famous story passed down through centuries about an English sailor who had just docked in a Dutch port. After months at sea, he was completely oblivious to the fever gripping the land. He walked into the office of a wealthy merchant, carrying the scent of the ocean, naive and unaware that he was about to commit one of the most expensive mistakes in culinary history. Number 42. On the merchant's counter, the sailor saw a Semper Augustus tulip bulb lying loose. With the hungry eyes of a man long at sea, he saw only a fresh onion. He thought the crisp brown skin and white flesh would be the perfect garnish to eat with his salty herring for a humble breakfast. Number 43. Without a moment's hesitation, he calmly picked up the bulb, drew the small dagger at his side, peeled it, and sliced it up. He ate it piece by piece with relish, enjoying its pungent and crisp taste. He did not know that every bite in his mouth at that moment was worth the equivalent of the entire ship he had just sailed into port, including the mast and anchor. Number 44. The ending for that unwillingly luxurious breakfast was prison. The poor sailor was jailed for months for the crime of destroying property. In the cold and damp cell, perhaps he had plenty of time to reflect on the taste of that world's most expensive onion, a meal where the price paid was not money, but a man's freedom. Number 45. In the ancient city of Haarlem, an eccentric botanist owned a treasure, an extremely rare black tulip bulb. Its jet black color was the dream of every collector, likened to a moonless night. He planted it in a private garden, surrounded by iron fences, cherishing it like a longed-for child, separate from the noise of the market outside. Number 46. Traders from all over flocked there, carrying heavy bags of gold. offering to buy that black bulb for the price of a fortune. But the botanist firmly shook his head. He refused every offer, declaring that he kept it for pure scientific passion, not for money. His pride stood in complete contrast to the crowd's frantic greed. Number 47. That refusal ignited a rage. The crowd of merchants, feeling insulted because their money was disregarded, broke down the garden gate and rushed in. In a fit of irrational fury, one man used a stick to smash the precious black bulb right before the old man's eyes. If we can't have it, no one can. The bulb lay shattered on the ground, taking with it the work of a lifetime. Number 48. In Amsterdam, right by the sparkling canal, a grand townhouse built of red brick was sold. But this transaction did not use cash. The owner agreed to hand over the keys to his house in exchange for exactly 3 rare tulip bulbs. Picture it, a sturdy structure, sheltering generations from rain and sun, traded for 3 tiny sprouts that could fit in the palm of one hand. Number 49. Today, if you walk the streets of Amsterdam, look closely at the old houses. On the facade of one house, there remains a gable stone carved with the image of 3 tulips. It is a silent historical witness recording that strange transaction of yesteryear. The stone remains, the house remains, but those 3 bulbs vanished into the void hundreds of years ago. Number 50. In rural areas, the fever reached even peaceful farms. Simple farmers led their entire herds of dairy cows to the market. The large cows, the source of milk sustaining the whole family, with their bells ringing. All were traded for a bulb the size of a child's fist. They believed that bulb would give birth to gold much faster than milking cows every morning. Number 51. Dutch children of that time were also swept up in this strange atmosphere. Instead of playing hide-and-seek or flying kites, children spent all day digging in the garden or by the roadside. They hoped to find forgotten or dropped bulbs. Innocent children's games suddenly took on the color of adult greed. Laughter mixed with the sound of hoes hitting stones. Number 52. The famous landscape painter Jan van Goyen, whose paintings hang solemnly in museums today, was also a victim of this fever. He was swept up in the wave of speculation and lost his life savings when the market crashed. The talented hands that once painted silver clouds and gentle rivers now trembled under the weight of massive debts. Number 53. To pay off his debt, Jan van Goyen had to work exhaustively during his final years. He painted over 1,000 paintings and thousands of sketches to exchange for money to cover the debt. Perhaps that is why his paintings often carry the gray, melancholy tone of the Dutch sky. Great art is sometimes born from the tragedy of debt and destitution. Number 54. There is a tragicomic anecdote about a hen. It wandered into the garden of a wealthy merchant and began scratching the earth for worms by natural instinct. Unfortunately, instead of finding worms, it dug up and scratched a tulip bulb worth thousands of guilders buried shallowly in the ground. A mindless animal had inadvertently destroyed an entire fortune with just a few kicks. Number 55. The garden owner, in a rage, sued the neighbor who owned the chicken. He demanded compensation huge enough to buy a whole village. The trial was tense over just a chicken and a root. This incident shows the distortion in society's value scale at that time. The life of an animal or neighborly relations were cheaper than a flower. Number 56. Extravagance reached the peak of absurdity. Rumor has it that at dinner parties of the aristocracy, instead of giving guests small souvenirs, the host gave each guest an expensive tulip bulb. The bulbs were wrapped in silk, handed to one another like precious gems. Wealth was flaunted wildly amidst music and the clinking of glasses. Number 57. The stress of speculation also caused sudden deaths. An old merchant in Rotterdam, after pouring all his money into buying a collection of rare bulbs, suffered a heart attack and died on the spot when he discovered they had been eaten by mold after a night of poor storage. He died not of old age, but from the shock of seeing his assets turn into black water. Number 58. In the taverns where trading took place, the concept of day and night was erased. Candles were lit continuously for 24 hours. Beeswax candle burned down one after another, dripping hot wax onto the wooden tables. People did not sleep, did not go home. They sat there, eyes red from lack of sleep, waiting for the next transaction in an endless drunken stupor. Number 59. Wine and beer flowed like streams during those days. People drank to celebrate a successful sale, drank to get the courage to buy more, and drank to forget the vague fear that it was all just an illusion. The smell of alcohol, tobacco smoke, and sweat mixed together, creating a thick atmosphere of collective euphoria before disaster struck. Number 60. But then, behind the loud laughter and the clinking of glasses, cracks began to appear. Smiles began to feel forced. Eyes began to look anxious. People started asking themselves, "Who will be the last person to buy these flowers?" A feeling of unease crept into the cold winter air, signaling that a collapse was very near. Number 61. There was a grim backdrop looming over this brilliant fever that few noticed. The plague, also known as the Black Death, was raging in the Netherlands at that exact time. While tulips bloomed in every color, out on the streets, carts carrying dead bodies quietly rolled through the fog. Life and death, beauty and rot, walked together in a bizarre dance of fate. Number 62. The proximity of death created a deeply unstable social psychology. People saw friends and relatives leave too quickly. This bred a mentality of wanting to gamble everything. They wanted to get rich fast, to enjoy a luxurious life immediately before the Grim Reaper knocked on their door. Tulip Mania, in a way, was a desperate resistance of humans against the impermanence of life. Number 63. 17th century Dutch society was built on the foundation of strict Calvinist Protestantism. Their core values were humility, thrift, and the glorification of hard work. They believed that wealth must be created from sweat and tears, from hands toiling in the fields or workshops, not from windfalls falling from the sky. Number 64. Therefore, the tulip fever went against every moral value the Dutch held dear. It was a symbol of laziness, greed, and frivolous luxury. Those participating in this market were intoxicated with making money, but deep in their souls, they also carried a vague guilt. They were betraying the traditions of their ancestors to chase the call of easy money. Number 65. Every Sunday, from the pulpits of ancient churches, pastors with stern faces raised warnings. They called the tulip by a terrifying name, the flower of the devil. Sermons echoed in the soaring vaults, reminding people that the seductive beauty was just a trap leading their souls astray from God's path. Number 66. They warned that God saw everything, and he would punish this bottomless greed. They likened the flower fever to the Israelites worshiping the golden calf in the Bible. Prophecies of a collapse, a punishment from the heavens, sowed silent fear in the hearts of the flock, even as their hands still held flower purchase contracts. Number 67. To satirize this vice, painters and printers released a series of caricature pamphlets. In them, they drew monkeys dressed in aristocratic clothes, sitting at round tables, swindling each other to trade tulips. The image of the monkey, a symbol of foolish imitation and base instinct, was used to mock the very humans who thought themselves wise in their monetary drunkenness. Number 68. Dutch society at that time was deeply divided like a large crack. On one side were honest laborers, still working every day, and looking at speculators with a mix of contempt and envy. On the other side were flower millionaires, the newly rich, walking with swagger but full of insecurity inside. The community cohesion, once strong among the Dutch, began to loosen under the power of jealousy. Number 69. However, in art culture, the tulip carried a profound philosophical meaning. People believed that the brilliant but soon fading beauty of this flower symbolized the brevity of human life. A flower is beautiful for only a few days and then drops its petals, just as a human life passes like a shadow across a window. Wealth and fame will eventually fade like the color on a petal. Number 70. This is most clearly shown in the famous still life painting style called vanitas, vanity. In these dark oil paintings, artists often depicted a brilliant vase of tulips placed right next to a human skull or a running hourglass. That chilling contrast was a constant reminder. Memento mori, remember that you must die. Number 71. The message from those paintings was clear and haunting. Both that haughty flower and the human admiring it will eventually wither and return to dust just the same. In the darkness of the bedroom tonight, that image reminds us to let go of worldly ambitions to find peace in the soul. Nothing is forever except the silence of the void. Number 72. Back to the harsh reality. The plague killed many people, including potential buyers and sellers. Every time a merchant died of the plague, a link in the trading chain broke. Demand in the market began to shrink physically, simply because there were fewer people alive to buy flowers. Death had begun to intervene in economics. Number 73. But paradoxically, the plague also created a severe labor shortage. Surviving workers were suddenly paid wages many times higher due to the scarcity of manpower. This unexpected surplus money flowed into the pockets of common people, and instead of saving, they took it to speculate on tulips, a vicious circle. One person's tragedy became the capital for another's gamble. Number 74. A bizarre atmosphere hung over these low countries. It was a mix of the scent of flowers, the smell of money, and the smell of death. A dance of the reaper and the god of fortune took place right on the cobblestone streets of Amsterdam, creating a social picture both magnificent and tragic, haunting the mind of anyone living in that era. Number 75. People realized that they were not just trading inanimate flowers, they were trading hope. For the poor living in cramped, damp houses, the paper owning a tulip bulb was the only ticket for them to dream of a different life, a life with light, warm fireplaces, and good food. They bought the dream of escaping poverty, not buying plants. Number 76. Within families, generational conflicts exploded fiercely. Old conservative fathers wanted to preserve life savings, while young, hot-blooded sons wanted to mortgage everything to invest. Family dinners became heavy with arguments, tables slammed and doors slammed in anger. Greed had crept into every cell of the family. Number 77. There are records of the weeping of wives and mothers. They stood helplessly watching their husbands take the last pieces of furniture, the heirloom oak cabinets, the wedding dishes, out of the house to exchange for a flimsy IOU. Their pain was not noisy like the markets, but silent and soaked with tears in empty kitchens. Number 78. The tension reached its peak when local churches issued a final threat. They would refuse to perform funerals and burials according to religious rites for those who died bankrupt from tulip debt. For a devout person in the 17th century, not being buried properly meant the soul would not be saved. That was the most terrible punishment. Number 79. But alas, the temptation of gold outweighed the fear of hell. Humans still rushed into the intoxication, like moths rushing into an oil lamp flame. They told themselves they would stop at the right time, take profits before disaster struck. But greed is like seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. It is never enough. Number 80. And then, like the old pendulum clock in the corner, counting every tick. Tock. The time of the fever had reached its final seconds. Everything had been pushed to the breaking point. The string was stretched to its limit and about to snap. A terrifying silence began to creep into the auctions, signaling the coming storm that would wash everything out to sea. Number 81. On February 3rd, 1637, at a fateful auction in the city of Haarlem, an invisible change took place in the air. When the auctioneer brought his wooden gavel down on the table to start the session, instead of the usual shouting and scrambling, he received only absolute silence. It was a moment of frozen history when the fever suddenly broke without warning. Number 82. The seller stated the starting price, but no one answered. Not a single hand was raised. Eyes that once burned with greed now looked at each other with suspicion and fear. The collective frenzy suddenly vanished like mist under the sun. For the first time in years, people suddenly realized they were standing in an empty room with worthless onions. Number 83. News of the failed auction in Haarlem spread as fast as an invisible virus through every corner of the Netherlands, from tavern to tavern, city to city. No one is buying anymore. That short sentence shattered the fragile faith holding up the entire market. Fear crept into every sleep, waking everyone from their long-term sleepwalking. Number 84. In just a few short days, tulip prices went into free fall. The price chart plunged vertically like a sheer cliff. Value dropped 90%, then 99%. Huge asset figures on paper evaporated quickly into thin air, leaving utter astonishment. There was no price floor, nothing to catch the falling of withered petals. Number 85. The cruel reality became clearer than ever. The famous Semper Augustus bulbs, worth a magnificent mansion a few days ago, were now offered for the price of an onion, and still, no one bothered to look. The absurd comparison of days past had now become the truth. They were just ordinary plant bulbs, nothing more, nothing less, returning to their true natural value. Number 86. Thousands of Dutch citizens, from the upper-class nobility to poor craftsmen, simultaneously fell into bankruptcy in a single week. The wealth they thought they held turned out to be just an illusion. Lavish parties ended. Luxury carriages were repossessed. An entire nation suddenly sobered up and found itself standing at the edge of the abyss of debt. Number 87, promissory notes, futures contracts written neatly in black ink on white paper, now became literally waste paper. Promises to pay, commitments on family honor, all became meaningless in the face of the market collapse. Papers blew scattered on the cold cobblestone streets, swept away by the wind like yesterday's trash. Number 88. Chaos engulfed society. Buyers refused to pay because they claimed the item's value was no longer as committed. Sellers refused to deliver flowers, knowing that receiving a debt note now was useless. Close friends became enemies. Business partners turned their backs on each other. The silence of human kindness covered the streets that once bustled with laughter. Number 89. The Dutch court system was quickly paralyzed and overwhelmed by tens of thousands of debt lawsuits. Judges and lawyers worked day and night, but were helpless. How could debt be collected when everyone had no money? Lawsuit files piled up like mountains, but no verdict could bring money back into the pockets of dreamers. Number 90. Finally, the Dutch government and major cities had to intervene to restore order. They issued a historic ruling, declaring that speculative tulip contracts were considered gambling risks, not legal commercial debts. This meant the law would not protect these debts. A legal full stop to the madness. Number 91. The wheel of fate had turned a full circle. The rich became poor. The poor returned to being poor, but now their shoulders bore extra despair and broken promises. Cruel equality was reestablished. Before the economic deluge, everyone was equally empty-handed. No one won in this game except those who stood on the sidelines. Number 92. The greatest loss was not money, but trust. Trust between people in Dutch society collapsed completely. People were suspicious of each other, no longer believing in handshakes or promises. A gloomy, cold atmosphere covered the social psyche for many years after, like a long winter without sunlight. Number 93. After the fever passed, people saw a heartbreaking sight. Once precious tulip bulbs were thrown into gutters, discarded by the roadside like trash. They lay there, covered in mud, trampled by passers-by without mercy. Adoration had turned into hatred. Humans vented their anger on the innocent flowers for their own stupidity. Number 94. However, there is a miracle of creation. Ignoring the market collapse, ignoring human suffering, those discarded bulbs still silently took root in the earth. The following spring, they still sprouted, still bloomed into brilliant flowers under the sun. Nature does not care about price. The flower still blooms because that is its mission, strangely beautiful and calm. Number 95. Time heals all wounds. The love for the beauty of this flower remained deep in the Dutch soul. Today, the Netherlands is still the world's largest exporter of tulips. Endless fields of flowers stretching like colorful ribbons remain the symbol of this country. But now, it bears the beauty of labor and tourism, not greed. Number 96. The bloody lesson was remembered. Today, the Dutch are known as cautious and practical people. No one sells their house to buy a flower anymore. They understand that a house is for living and a flower is for viewing. The order of value has been rearranged to its proper place. Peace has returned to the homes by the green canals. Number 97. Tulip Mania, the tulip fever, has become a classic lesson found in the first chapter of every economics textbook worldwide. It is taught to millions of students across generations as an eternal warning about herd mentality and market bubbles. History turned a tragedy into a valuable lesson. Number 98. This story leaves humanity with a profound philosophy. Real value and market price are two completely different things. A flower can be very beautiful, but its value lies only in the enjoyment of beauty, not measured by a fortune. True happiness does not come from owning inflated things, but from peace in the soul. Number 99. 400 years have passed. The flowers of 1637 have vanished into the void. The people of that year, the rich, the destitute, those who wept, those who laughed, are now all sleeping peacefully underground. All joys and sorrows, all gains and losses, were finally erased by time, returning to silent dust. Number 100. And the final thing. All that remains of the storm of yesteryear are fields of brilliant flowers swaying in the peaceful spring breeze. And a good night's sleep for you, right now. The past has closed. The outside world has gone to sleep. Only you remain, your breath, and the absolute silence of tonight. We have finished counting. 100 truths have passed like sand slipping through fingers. The great tulip fever has receded into the past, leaving a lesson on impermanence. You see, no matter how big the storm, no matter how earth-shaking the event, eventually night falls and peace returns. Now, there are no more numbers, no more historical events to remember. Your mind is now like a field of tulips after the rain, still, cool, and radiant in dreams. Let your body sink deep, down. Feel the softness of the pillow, breath gentle, steady. Go to sleep, sleep well, and tomorrow when you wake up, you will see the world is still as beautiful as blooming flowers. Good night.